Welcome to WYE, What's Your Experience? I'm Lily Montero, and I'm the editor-in-chief of The Experience. WYE is an LMC podcast all about the unique experiences of the students here at Los Medanos College. And this week, we're doing something a little bit special. Currently listening to is a conversation between me and Takia Taylor, the president of the BSU, about where she sees the future of the Black community heading. We hope you enjoy, and see you next week. I know that you did a study last semester with Scott Hubbard called State of the Black Union, and it was about Black student success here. Could you just talk a bit about that study and essentially what you guys found and stuff like that?
So the base of the study was to try and figure out Black success on campus, like how our African American students were doing. So what we did is we worked with the district, Scott Hubbard and I, and we found information on unit load, GPA, ages. We tried to find out how many of our students were parents, and we looked at course completion versus course success. Course completion means that you're just completing the course, whether it's A through F, and course success means that you're getting a C or better. What we found in that study actually is that African Americans, Black students on campus, are operating at the same level as the campus as a whole, which was actually amazing to find out. So when it comes to course load, we're taking the 12 units or more. When it comes to GPA, we're maintaining between that 2.0 and that 2.8 status. When it comes to course completion and course success, though, there is a gap. So we are actually completing the courses, but our course success is low. So now we have to find out where that increment is happening, like what's happening for our students to be sitting in classes and not actually succeeding in them.
Okay. And so what do you think that LMC can be doing better to help raise that course success, raise those numbers?
I don't think it's a matter of what they can be doing better. I think it's a matter of finding the information. I think once you know what you're dealing with, then you know how to help. So I think it's a matter of gathering the African American students in some kind of capacity and trying to figure out why they're sitting in these classrooms and maybe not retaining the information. Maybe they're having issues with their teachers. Maybe they are not able to make it to class because they have other responsibilities at home. It's just finding out where that gap is coming in at and being the change to help make them better at completing the classes and getting the course success.
I know you mentioned beforehand that you're doing your own research. Could you tell us about the research that you kind of have in the works?
So I actually found it real interesting. I had Professor Knoll for English, and for him, I did a research project on incorporating ethnic studies into the high school level. It was actually a study that was done originally by Stanford. And what the study was is it focused on truancy rates within predominantly people of color. So they're noticing that our students of color have a larger amount of truancy than any other race, and that's Black, that's Latino, Asian Pacific Islander. Those are our truants. And what they're saying is if you take away just the Eurocentric history and incorporate ethnic studies into these classrooms, then you will have better success from the students. So when Stanford did this study, they did it in the San Francisco Unified School District, and they found that when you incorporate ethnic studies into a curriculum, the truancy rate actually goes down. These students who were at risk for not passing high school began to start making 2.5s and better, and some of them actually were on track to then go to college. So once you incorporate someone's culture, someone's history into their lives at a young age, it makes them want to actually dive into school and figure it out.
So do you think that early engagement with ethnic studies would help kind of college success too, as well?
Absolutely, because when you find out at a young age that a lot of scientists are Black, when you find out at a young age that a lot of statisticians are Black, when you find out at a young age that there are people of color who just kind of, they made it, they really made it, you have you have a bigger outlook on life,
Yeah.
other than this is Martin Luther King, he went to jail, he did all of these protests, and then he made it. You know, Malcolm X, he was a black activist, he was a radical, and then he made it. You have these everyday people, these scientists, these statisticians, these just everyday people, and it's like they went to school, they made it through school, and now we have the stoplight. Now we have peanut butter. It's
Yeah.
like once you figure out a little bit of your history and your culture, other than what we're taught Eurocentrically, then it does. I feel like it absolutely helps more.
Yeah. So do you think shifting the narrative away from those that we've, I guess, not glorified, because the glorification of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, those are all valid, but do you think bringing it down to moving away from just civil rights era and bringing it down to normal everyday to day, what everyday to day success looks like, do you think that that would be more helpful?
I do, because when you think of Malcolm X, when you think of Rosa Parks, when you think of Martin Luther King, you think of the sacrifices that they had to make. And in life, you do have to make sacrifices, but they can start small and then reach that magnitude. So when you think about the people who invented these things as African American inventors, you know that they sat in the same seats as you. You know that they took the same test as you. You know that, they had difficulties with teachers too. You kind of start to be able to put yourself in these people's shoes. When you think of Martin Luther King, you sit there and you're like, geez, do I have to get hosed? Do I have to go to jail? Like, how? What? I have to do all of that to be great?
Right.
But when you think of the stoplight, it's like, you know what? I have to come up with an idea, stick with school, make sure that my idea is valid to the progression of society, and then I can make it.
Yeah.
It's less complex. Not to take away from Malcolm or Martin or Rosa, absolutely not to take away from them.
Yeah.
But if you start small and then go big, you could cultivate a whole new society almost.
Yeah. So I guess shifting from the 60s and the 70s, obviously, to now, what do you think that our new social leadership, how do you think we're doing, and what do you think we can learn from them?
So I want to reroute it back to sacrifice. So when you think about the 40s all the way up into the 70s, a lot of our black leaders were not scared to sacrifice things. So you do think about how Martin Luther King had to sit in jail. You do think about how Malcolm had to be a radical. You do think about how Rosa Parks had to sit on that bus. They were people who were fed up but ready to fight legislation. They were ready to fight the judicial system. They were ready to go to war with the people that mattered. Not saying that our everyday society doesn't matter, but when it comes to our leadership, a lot of the change happens at the legislative branch. Mm-hmm. So you think about civil rights and all the acts that were passed. You think about all of the laws that were passed from the 1800s into the 1970s. You think about how just everything shifted once things were on a piece of paper, once loopholes were found, once there were clauses set in place for us. Mm-hmm. When you think about that kind of stuff, that's actually what got the change. And then we had the social movements that backed that up. We had the social structure that backed that up. We had all of the people to back up these legislative moves. And so when I think about our leadership, we have to be ready as leaders to sacrifice like Martin Luther King Jr. did. We have to be ready to sit in jail and know that when we get out of jail, there is a young black leader waiting for us, and we have to say, hey, I went to jail. This is how I did it. I was standing up for something that I believe in. Let's make sure you don't have to go to jail, and everything is good for you. You know, you do have to be ready to sacrifice some things for your cause or for your movement in order to really progress our social and our cultural movements forward.
Yeah. So what do you think are some legislative loopholes that we could address?
So actually, really great movie on, I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but I loved it, was 13th, and it's about the 13th Amendment. And then you have Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which addresses the 13th Amendment. And basically what the 13th Amendment did, which I learned in Miss Codwell's class, Tess Codwell, love her, is it abolished slavery, but once it abolished slavery, you cannot be a slave unless you're arrested and charged as a felon. So, people who are held in our legal systems as felons, if you are in jail and you are a felon, you are technically a slave. You pretty much have to do whatever these jail systems, these prison systems are saying. And that gets kind of crazy. In the movie 13th, they talk about this company called ALEC. And what ALEC does is it's a third-party company that combines big business and legislation, which you're not supposed to do. All of these companies that we know and we love, they are in these jail systems, in these prison systems, getting their products made, and then they're selling them to us for $20, $35, $110. So I don't know if they're still doing it, but that kind of stuff was in the movie 13th. And these people in prison, they have to make these products for pennies on the dollar because really in jail, they don't have to pay you anything at all. So I think the 13th Amendment gets really important because you do get to be a slave if you're a felon. Other than that, slavery is abolished. It gets real interesting. But I think once we educate ourselves, which I'm still doing, which is why I'm in school, once we educate ourselves a little bit more, we learn how to fight those kind of things. And we progress, we move forward. So, where do I see the Black community going? I love the Black community. I love the African American community. I love the African diaspora of everything. Because when you think of being Black, being African American, being African, or just being a person of color, it's such a broad spectrum. A person Black from the Bay isn't the same as a person Black from New York. A person Black from New York isn't the same as a person Black from Florida. You know, the spectrum is just so broad. So when I think about the progression of the Black community or where I see it going, I feel like the Black community has to do what works for their area. You start with your community and you see what sacrifices you have to make for your area, your community, and you can evolve that on a larger scale, but you start small and you go big. Yeah. And that's how I think we progress ourselves forward, is we start small and we go big.
Cool. Thank you for talking to me today.
No, man, I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah.
It was real dope.
Hey there. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please keep an eye out for another episode next week. Special thanks to Jakia Taylor for accommodating us this week, and of course, another special thanks to Julia Steele for our amazing music. Till the next experience, bye.